Okay, we're going to talk now about managing employees and trade secrets. And this is a critical issue for most businesses because it's been shown time and again in a lot of different surveys that the most loss that's suffered by businesses of valuable information happens through employees. But the interesting thing is that it's not because they intend to cause harm or that they're trying to steal. Instead, the reason why there is so much of the loss that happens through employees is because of misunderstandings. And so what this does is highlight the need for careful management of the process. Now, we have to begin by understanding that in the modern business, you have to share a great deal of information with employees. Some of your most sensitive information you put in their hands. Sometimes they end up learning a lot about the industry and about your business. Well, what they learn that's in their own skill set or generally about the industry is theirs to keep if they leave. What they can't take are your specific trade secrets, the things that they've done for you and learned that are specific to your business. And the key, therefore, is to try to make sure that everybody understands what is there and what is yours. And understand that no one typically these days remains in one job for their entire career. In fact, the average number of jobs that an employee has over the course of their career is 11. And so you're going to have to be prepared for the fact that people leave. And sometimes it's not the most convenient change for you because you've lost someone that you've invested a great deal of time in, but they can leave. And so your objective should be being prepared for that to happen in a way that reduces the risk of any harm or loss to the business of seeing this person go. So you do this, you focus on managing employees, both to protect against loss that you might be able to prevent, but also to avoid contamination of information coming from somebody else that you don't want to have in your business. And so the way that we look at employee management in this area is basically in three parts: when they come, while they're there, and when they're on the way out. When they're coming, you try to make sure both that they're not bringing anything with them that they shouldn't, and that they understand what your rules and procedures are and what your culture is about around protecting confidential information. While they're there, the most important thing for you to do and the most cost-effective way to protect your trade secrets is to focus on education and training to make sure that the risk of misunderstanding is low. And then when an employee gets ready to leave, it's very important to focus on ensuring that they know when they're leaving what it is that they're supposed to be keeping secret after they leave, and to make sure that you find out as much as possible about where they're going and what they're doing so that you can make an assessment of the risk and perhaps engage with the employee to find ways to reduce that risk. Overall, the employee has the responsibility generally to protect the employer's trade secrets. That's inherent in the relationship, and it's usually reflected in a contract. But the employer also has responsibilities to clarify for the employee what it is that's important and what the expectations are that the employee will behave in a certain way to protect that information. So staying focused on these issues is really important. And you might consider the story of Uber and Google or Waymo in the self-driving car case that came up a few years ago, where the leader of Waymo's self-driving car project left to go to Uber, and in the process downloaded 17,000 confidential files. Well, what's really interesting about this is that Waymo found out about all that almost a year later, when it happened to receive by mistake an email from a supplier that was common to Waymo and to Uber. It was misdirected to Uber and to Waymo, and so they saw what was happening. The point is, if they had had a thorough exit process with Mr. Lewandowski when he left, and they had engaged in appropriate computer forensics to look at what he was doing, they probably would have discovered this much earlier and been able to prevent a lot of the harm that happened. So even in large companies, there is not always the attention paid to this sort of issue that it could, but you in your business can, by being very proactive about dealing with your employees, understanding what their potential for concerns around confidential information are, and dealing with that both while they're there and on the way out, you will have reduced the risk that your own organization will either lose valuable information or may get somebody else's mixed up in it.